Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Science Society. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Maybe you've had a long day, or perhaps you're someone who prefers drifting off to the gentle rhythm of nature's mysteries rather than counting sheep. Either way, this evening's journey is crafted just for you. You have nothing to do but rest. Let your muscles soften, your breathing deepen, and your mind wander through the misty mountain forests of central China, where one of Earth's most beloved and puzzling creatures makes its home. And if these calm explorations help you unwind or give you a peaceful way to end your day, consider liking and subscribing to the channel. It helps others discover their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. Tonight, we're entering the world of the giant panda. These black and white bears have captivated human hearts for generations, becoming symbols of conservation, emblems of endangered species protection, and icons recognized across every culture and language. But beneath their adorable appearance lies a biological contradiction so profound that scientists still puzzle over how these animals survive at all. The giant panda is a creature that defies evolutionary logic. A carnivore that abandoned meat for one of the least nutritious foods imaginable. A bear whose reproductive biology seems designed to prevent its own survival. And an animal that lives on the edge of possibility every single day. As we drift through their story tonight, you'll discover that pandas are far stranger and more remarkable than their cuddly appearance suggests. They are living paradoxes, evolutionary puzzles wrapped in the softest fur, survivors against odds that should have eliminated them millions of years ago. Their existence asks questions about adaptation, about the strange paths evolution can take, and about what it means to specialize so completely that you become dependent on a single resource. The panda's tale is one of ancient choices, modern struggles, and a quiet resilience that continues to surprise those who study them most closely. So settle in, let your thoughts grow gentle, and prepare to meet an animal that, despite everything working against it, has found a way to endure in its mountain stronghold for millions of years, munching bamboo with a determination that borders on the miraculous, the paradox of the panda, a carnivore that eats bamboo. The giant panda presents one of nature's most perplexing contradictions. Look at its teeth, study its digestive system, examine its DNA, and you'll find unmistakable evidence of a carnivore. The panda belongs to the order Carnivora, sharing its taxonomic classification with wolves, lions, and all the world's bears. Its anatomy tells the story of meat-eating ancestors, of hunters that once prowled ancient forests in pursuit of prey. And yet, when you observe a panda in the wild or in captivity, you'll witness something that defies this carnivorous heritage entirely. You'll see an animal spending 12 to 16 hours each day doing nothing but eating bamboo. Not occasionally, not as a supplement. Bamboo comprises over 99% of a giant panda's diet. Some studies suggest it's closer to 98%, while others push the figure even higher. Either way, these bears have committed themselves almost exclusively to a food source that, by any reasonable measure, should not be able to sustain them. Bamboo is one of the least nutritious foods a mammal can eat. It's extraordinarily high in fiber, particularly in difficult-to-digest cellulose and lignin. It contains relatively little protein, minimal fats, and provides shockingly low energy returns for the effort required to consume and process it. And here's where the contradiction deepens. The panda still has the digestive system of a carnivore. Unlike true herbivores such as cows or horses, which have evolved elaborate, multi-chambered stomachs filled with specialized bacteria to break down plant cellulose, the panda has a simple stomach. Just one chamber, like a dog or a cat. Its intestines are short and straight, typical of carnivores, designed for the rapid processing of easily digestible meat, not for the slow, methodical extraction of nutrients from fibrous plant material. The panda lacks the digestive enzymes necessary to break down cellulose effectively. Its gut microbiome, surprisingly, resembles that of a carnivore far more than an herbivore. Studies have found that pandas have extremely low numbers of cellulase and hemicellulase genes in their gut bacteria, even fewer than humans, and far fewer than true herbivores. So, how do they survive? The answer is both simple and staggering: volume and speed. Unable to extract much nutrition from each bite of bamboo, pandas compensate by eating enormous quantities. An adult panda consumes between 26 and 84 pounds of bamboo every single day. That's not a typo. Some pandas eat more than half their body weight in bamboo daily. They do this because bamboo passes through their digestive system incredibly quickly. Food moves from mouth to excretion in just 5 to 13 hours, barely giving the panda's body time to extract what little nutrition the bamboo contains. This rapid transit means pandas spend most of their waking hours either eating or preparing to eat. They have no time for extended social interactions, no energy for elaborate behaviors, no surplus calories for anything beyond the basics of survival. And the consequences of this diet show up in measurable ways. Pandas have a remarkably low metabolic rate for an animal of their size, lower even than sloths. They move slowly, deliberately, conserving every possible calorie. They avoid steep terrain when they can, preferring gentle slopes that don't tax their limited energy reserves. They rarely engage in extended play or activity unless necessary. The bamboo diet has shaped not just what they eat, but how they live, how they move, and how they interact with their world. The mechanics of eating bamboo are themselves fascinating. Pandas possess what's often described as a pseudo-thumb, a remarkable adaptation that helps them grasp bamboo stalks. This isn't actually a true thumb, but rather an enlarged sesamoid bone extending from the wrist. This modified wrist bone acts like an opposable digit, allowing pandas to grip bamboo stems between this pseudo-thumb and their 5 regular fingers. With this grip, they can hold bamboo shoots, strip away the tough outer layers, and efficiently process the tender inner tissue. It's a beautiful piece of evolutionary engineering, a small modification that enables a behavior essential to their survival. Their teeth have adapted too. Pandas have broad, flat molars, much larger and more developed than typical carnivores. These grinding teeth, powered by massive jaw muscles, can crush and pulverize even the toughest bamboo fibers. The jaw muscles themselves are so pronounced that they've shaped the panda's skull, creating that characteristic round face we find so endearing. That roundness isn't just aesthetic. It's the external evidence of internal power, of muscles capable of processing one of nature's most fibrous foods hour after hour, day after day, year after year. But here's something that surprises many people. Despite their almost exclusive bamboo diet, pandas haven't completely lost their taste for other foods. They retain decidedly bear-like teeth, with prominent canines that hint at their carnivorous heritage. And occasionally, pandas do eat meat. They've been observed scavenging carcasses of wild boar, consuming small rodents, eating fish when available, and even hunting pikas, the small rabbit-like mammals that share their mountain habitat. These meat meals are rare, but they happen. Some researchers believe pregnant or lactating females may seek out animal bones and carrion for additional nutrients, particularly calcium and certain vitamins difficult to obtain from bamboo alone. In captivity, pandas sometimes receive supplementary foods. Many zoos provide specially formulated panda cakes made of grains and packed with vitamins and minerals. Pandas readily accept apples, carrots, sweet potatoes, and other produce, showing that their digestive systems can still handle variety, even if they rarely encounter it in the wild. This dietary flexibility suggests that the panda's commitment to bamboo isn't about an inability to digest other foods. It's about availability, abundance, and perhaps something deeper we don't yet fully understand. One of the strangest aspects of the panda's bamboo diet is how inefficient it makes them as digesters. Studies have shown that pandas absorb only about 17 to 33% of the protein in the bamboo they consume. The rest passes through undigested, visible in the dozens of times they defecate each day. Yes, dozens. Pandas poop approximately 40 to 50 times daily, producing feces that still contain recognizable fragments of bamboo stalks and leaves. Their droppings are so fiber-rich that in some regions people have used dried panda dung to make paper and even craft items, a testament to how much plant material passes through these bears completely unchanged. This seems like a terrible survival strategy. And yet, pandas have persisted for millions of years on this diet. They've found a way to make it work, even if just barely. The bamboo they eat varies by season, elevation, and availability. When fresh bamboo shoots emerge in spring, pandas gorge on them. Shoots are the most nutritious part of the bamboo, rich in protein and starches, with protein content sometimes reaching 32%. During these months, pandas can build up reserves, storing energy for leaner times ahead. In summer, as shoots mature and become less nutritious, pandas shift to eating bamboo leaves. In winter, when leaves age and lose their nutritional value, pandas often subsist primarily on bamboo stems, the least nutritious option. And it's during these months that mortality rates climb. The panda's survival on bamboo represents one of nature's most improbable success stories. It shouldn't work. By all logic, an animal with a carnivore's digestive system attempting to live on such a nutrient-poor food should have gone extinct long ago. But pandas have carved out a niche, however precarious, in their mountain forests. They've become the world's most unlikely vegetarians, bears that abandoned the hunt for the quiet rhythm of endless chewing. Creatures that chose volume over variety, and in doing so, created one of evolution's most enduring mysteries. Ancient origins and evolutionary journey. To understand how pandas ended up with such an unusual diet, we need to travel back in time. Not just centuries or millennia, but millions of years, to an era when the ancestors of modern pandas looked and lived very differently from the bamboo-munching bears we know today. The story of how pandas became pandas is written in fossils scattered across 2 continents, in the slow accumulation of genetic mutations, and in the gradual transformation of carnivores into something nature had never quite seen before. The fossil record tells us that giant pandas have ancient roots. Specimens identified as early panda relatives have been found dating back to the Middle Pleistocene epoch, roughly 600,000 years ago, though the panda lineage likely stretches back much further. But even more surprisingly, some of the earliest panda ancestors didn't live in China at all. They lived in Europe. In recent years, paleontologists have discovered extinct panda relatives in places like Bulgaria and Hungary. Species that roamed European forests millions of years ago when the climate and landscape looked very different. One particularly interesting discovery is Agriarctos nikolovi, a species that lived in what is now Bulgaria approximately 6 million years ago. This ancient bear possessed characteristics that link it to the giant panda's lineage, suggesting that the evolutionary story of pandas may have begun not in the mountain forests of China, but in the warmer, more temperate regions of prehistoric Europe. From there, the ancestors of modern pandas likely migrated eastward across Asia, adapting to new environments, new climates, and new food sources as they traveled. By the early Pleistocene, roughly 2.5 million years ago, panda ancestors had established themselves across a vast range spanning much of eastern and southern China, extending north to what is now Beijing and south into regions that are today Myanmar and Vietnam. Fossils from these areas show that pandas once occupied a much larger territory than they do now, thriving in diverse forest environments across a huge swath of Asia. These ancient pandas were more widespread, more numerous, and likely more varied in their diet than their modern descendants. The critical question is, when and why did pandas abandon a varied, omnivorous diet for their near-total commitment to bamboo? The answer appears to lie somewhere between 7 million and 2 million years ago. Fossil evidence suggests that pandas began eating bamboo at least 7 million years ago, but they didn't become bamboo specialists overnight. For millions of years, pandas probably ate a mixed diet, consuming bamboo along with fruits, other vegetation, and meat. They were opportunistic omnivores, much like modern brown bears, eating whatever was seasonally abundant. The complete shift to a bamboo-dominated diet likely happened around 2 to 2.4 million years ago, coinciding with the evolution of Ailuropoda microta, a smaller ancestor of the modern giant panda. What drove this dietary change? We're not entirely certain, but scientists have proposed several theories. One possibility is competition. During this period, other large carnivores were abundant in the same regions. Tigers, leopards, wolves, and other predators all competed for the same prey. Bamboo, however, was abundant, available year-round, and almost no other large mammals ate it. By specializing in bamboo, early pandas may have found an ecological niche with little competition. Another factor may have been environmental change. The Pleistocene epoch saw dramatic climate fluctuations, with ice ages and warming periods causing forests to expand and contract. Bamboo forests proved remarkably resilient through these changes, potentially providing a stable food source when other foods became scarce. Pandas that could better utilize bamboo during difficult times would have had a survival advantage, gradually shifting the population toward greater and greater bamboo specialization. The genetic evidence for this dietary shift is fascinating. Scientists who have sequenced the giant panda genome discovered something remarkable. The gene that codes for the umami taste receptor, specifically the T1R1 gene, has become a pseudogene in pandas. This means it no longer functions. Umami is the taste of protein, the savory flavor of meat. By losing the ability to taste umami, pandas literally lost their taste for meat. The estimated time of this genetic mutation is approximately 4.2 million years ago, aligning roughly with the period when pandas were transitioning to a bamboo-heavy diet. Interestingly, this genetic change might be a consequence rather than a cause of the dietary shift. Herbivores like cows and horses have functioning T1R1 genes, so losing this gene isn't necessary for eating plants. Instead, the pseudogenization of T1R1 in pandas may have reinforced a dietary change that had already begun for other reasons. Once, pandas were eating primarily bamboo. The ability to taste meat became less important, and mutations that broke this taste receptor wouldn't be selected against. Over generations, the gene degraded until it no longer functioned at all. But taste is only part of the story. Recent research has explored the panda's appetite reward system, the complex neurological pathways that influence what animals choose to eat and how much satisfaction they derive from different foods. Some scientists believe pandas may have deficiencies in their dopamine metabolism, affecting how their brains respond to food rewards. If certain compounds in bamboo can stimulate the panda's appetite reward circuitry in ways that other foods don't, this might help explain why pandas seem content to eat almost nothing but bamboo despite it being nutritionally inadequate. The evolutionary journey from omnivorous bear to bamboo specialist was likely gradual, taking millions of years and countless generations. Each small change, each adaptation that made bamboo slightly more digestible or easier to process, would have provided a tiny advantage. The development of the pseudo-thumb, the enlargement of jaw muscles and molars, the adaptation of gut microbes, all these changes accumulated slowly, transforming pandas into the specialized creatures we see today. Yet, for all their specialization, pandas retain remnants of their carnivorous past. Their digestive system never fully adapted to an herbivorous lifestyle. Their gut bacteria remain more carnivore-like than herbivore-like. They still possess carnivore-specific genes and anatomical features. This incomplete transition has left pandas in a vulnerable position, highly specialized for a diet they're not fully equipped to digest, dependent on a single food source that provides barely enough nutrition to survive. It's a remarkable evolutionary gamble, one that has somehow paid off for millions of years but leaves pandas perpetually on the edge, always just one disaster, one habitat loss, one bamboo shortage away from crisis. Physical adaptations and remarkable features. Giant pandas possess a distinctive appearance that makes them instantly recognizable anywhere in the world. That striking black and white coloration, the round face, the stocky build, all contribute to an image that has become iconic. But every aspect of a panda's physical form represents an adaptation, a solution to the challenges of surviving on their unlikely diet in their mountainous habitat. Let's start with the most obvious feature, their coloring. Pandas are white with black legs, black arms, black ears, and black patches around their eyes. Some pandas have black fur that shows a chestnut red tinge in certain light, but the basic pattern remains consistent. This bold patterning might seem counterintuitive for an animal trying to survive in the wild. Bright colors and high contrast usually make animals more visible, not less. Yet in the panda's natural habitat, this coloring works surprisingly well. In the dappled light of bamboo forests, with patches of snow, dark rocks, and shadows, the panda's pattern breaks up its outline. At a distance, the black and white patches help pandas blend into their environment more effectively than you might expect. The dark legs merge with shadows and dark forest floor, while the white body can disappear against snow or bright patches of light. The coloring may also play a role in social communication, in a species that lives solitary lives and rarely encounters other pandas. High contrast markings might help individuals recognize each other when they do meet, making species identification instantaneous even from a distance. The panda's face is immediately recognizable thanks to those round black eye patches set against a white face. But that roundness isn't just about the patches. The entire shape of a panda's head reflects the enormous jaw muscles required for their bamboo diet. Pandas have some of the most powerful jaws in the bear family, capable of crushing tough bamboo stalks hour after hour without tiring. These massive jaw muscles attach from the top of the skull down to the jaw, and over evolutionary time, this has created the panda's characteristic round face. The skull has become more robust, broader, and rounder to accommodate muscles powerful enough to process 40 or more pounds of fibrous bamboo daily. Those same jaw muscles power an impressive set of teeth. Pandas have 42 teeth, typical for bears, but their molars are exceptionally large and flat, perfect for grinding. The back molars especially are massive compared to other bears, providing extensive surface area for crushing bamboo into digestible fragments. The molars have complex ridges and surfaces that act like millstones, pulverizing plant fibers. Meanwhile, pandas still retain prominent canines. The pointed teeth typically used by carnivores for tearing meat. In pandas, these canines are less about hunting and more about stripping tough outer layers off bamboo stalks, though they can deliver a powerful bite if a panda feels threatened. Adult giant pandas are substantial animals. Males typically weigh between 190 and 300 pounds, though some exceptionally large males can reach 330 pounds or more. Females are generally smaller, usually weighing between 150 and 220 pounds. They stand about 2 to 3 feet tall at the shoulder when on all fours, and can reach 5 to 6 feet in length from nose to tail. despite their considerable size, pandas move with surprising agility through their forest habitat. Pandas have a compact, stocky build with an enlarged shoulder and neck region and a comparatively smaller rear end. This gives them their characteristic ambling, pigeon-toed gait. They walk with their front paws turned slightly inward, creating an endearing waddle that makes them seem even more bear-like and cuddly. But don't let that clumsy appearance fool you. Pandas can move quickly through the forest when they need to, capable of surprising bursts of speed on all fours. They're also excellent climbers, especially as cubs and juveniles. Young pandas scamper up trees with ease, and even adults will climb when seeking a safe resting spot or trying to escape potential threats. Their front limbs are considerably more muscular than their rear legs, reflecting the importance of their arms and paws in feeding. Pandas spend hours each day holding bamboo stalks, manipulating them with precision, stripping leaves, and processing food. This requires strength and dexterity, and the panda's front limbs have evolved to provide both. The pseudo-thumb we discussed earlier, that enlarged wrist bone that acts like an opposable digit, is one of the panda's most remarkable features. This modified bone allows pandas to grip objects with far more precision than other bears. They can hold a single bamboo shoot, rotate it, strip it, and position it perfectly for their powerful molars to process. Pandas are also surprisingly flexible. They can contort their bodies into seemingly impossible positions, often relaxing in ways that look deeply uncomfortable, but which pandas find perfectly restful. You'll see pandas lounging on their backs, legs splayed, looking completely at ease. They'll drape themselves over rocks or branches, twist into curved positions, or sprawl out on their bellies with limbs extended in every direction. This flexibility may help them navigate the complex terrain of their mountain habitats, squeezing through dense bamboo thickets and maneuvering around obstacles. Their paws deserve special attention. The front paws have 5 toes plus that pseudo-thumb, giving them 6 digits functionally, if not anatomically. The pads on their paws are thick and covered with fur, providing insulation against cold ground and snow. The back paws are more typical of bears, with 5 toes and sturdy claws. Panda claws are strong and curved, useful for climbing, gripping, and occasionally digging. Unlike the retractable claws of cats, panda claws are always extended, leaving distinctive tracks in soft earth and snow. The tail of a giant panda is often overlooked, hidden in their fluffy rear end. But pandas actually have the second longest tail in the bear family, measuring about 4 to 6 inches. It's not particularly functional, more of a vestigial reminder of their evolutionary past. But it's there, a short black tuft that's rarely visible beneath all that fur. That fur itself is quite remarkable. Panda fur is thick, dense, and oily, providing excellent insulation against the cold, wet conditions of their mountain habitat. The oily nature of the fur makes it somewhat water-resistant, helping pandas stay relatively dry even in rain or snow. The fur is also surprisingly coarse and thick, not as soft as it appears from a distance. Pandas living at higher elevations tend to have even thicker coats than those at lower altitudes, an adaptation to colder temperatures. One of the most charming panda behaviors relates to their physical capabilities. Handstands. Male pandas, in particular, sometimes perform handstands against trees, walking their hind feet up the trunk until they're fully inverted. This isn't just playful behavior, though it certainly looks entertaining. Pandas do handstands to mark their scent higher on trees, effectively advertising their presence more widely. By leaving their scent mark as high as possible, a panda can signal to other pandas that a large, probably dominant individual occupies this territory. Despite their bulk and apparent clumsiness, pandas are good swimmers when necessary. They don't typically seek out water, but they're capable of crossing rivers and streams if needed. They'll drink from rivers and streams regularly, though during spring, when bamboo shoots are abundant and water-rich, pandas can sometimes go a day or two without needing to drink, getting sufficient moisture from their food. The physical form of the giant panda represents millions of years of adaptation to a highly specialized lifestyle. Every feature, from their round faces to their pseudo-thumbs to their powerful jaws, reflects the challenges and requirements of surviving almost exclusively on bamboo. They're built for a life of almost constant eating, for processing enormous quantities of low-nutrition food, for moving through mountainous bamboo forests, and for enduring the cold, isolated existence of a specialist in an unforgiving environment. They may look cuddly and clumsy, but giant pandas are remarkably well engineered for their peculiar ecological niche. Life in the mountains, habitat, and behavior. Giant pandas don't just live anywhere. They're confined to specific mountainous regions in central China, clinging to fragments of temperate forest habitat that represent the last remnants of what was once a much larger range. Understanding where pandas live and how they live helps explain both their vulnerability and their remarkable persistence. Today, wild giant pandas are found only in 6 isolated mountain ranges spanning 3 provinces in central China: Sichuan, Shanxi, and Gansu. The total area of suitable panda habitat is approximately 13,000 square kilometers, or about 5,000 square miles. That might sound substantial, but it's actually quite small when you consider it's spread across multiple separate mountain ranges, broken into fragments by valleys, rivers, human development, and unsuitable terrain. These mountain ranges rise from the eastern edge of the Tibetan Plateau, creating a complex landscape of peaks, valleys, and steep slopes covered in temperate forests. The largest population of wild pandas, roughly 1,200 individuals, lives in Sichuan province, particularly in the mountain ranges of Minshan, Zhonglai, Daxiangling, Xiaoxiangling, and Liangshan. About 300 more pandas inhabit the Qinling Mountains in Shanxi province, and approximately 100 live in the mountains of southern Gansu. These populations are scattered into more than 30 subpopulations, many isolated from each other by geographic barriers or human development. This fragmentation is one of the greatest threats to panda survival, preventing gene flow between groups and making each subpopulation vulnerable to localized disasters. Pandas live in temperate broadleaf and mixed forests, specifically in areas where bamboo grows abundantly. Their habitat is typically between 5,000 and 10,000 feet in elevation, though they'll range higher or lower depending on bamboo availability and season. The forests where pandas live are cool and wet, often shrouded in mist, receiving substantial rainfall throughout the year. These are old-growth forests with dense canopy cover, thick bamboo understories, and complex terrain full of rocky outcrops, fallen logs, and hidden caves or hollow trees that pandas use for shelter. The availability of bamboo drives almost every decision a panda makes about where to live and where to move. Scientists have found that pandas need at least 2 different species of bamboo in their home range to avoid starvation. This requirement stems from the way bamboo grows and reproduces. Different bamboo species have different life cycles, flowering and dying off at different times. When one bamboo species goes through its flowering cycle, which happens every few decades, the bamboo produces seeds and then dies over huge areas. If pandas depended on just one bamboo species, they could face mass starvation when that species flowered. Having access to multiple species provides insurance, ensuring that pandas always have something to eat. Pandas migrate seasonally within their habitat, moving up and down the mountains in response to bamboo availability and quality. In spring, as new bamboo shoots emerge at lower elevations, pandas descend from their winter ranges to feast on these nutritious shoots. By late spring and early summer, as shoots at lower elevations mature and become less nutritious, pandas begin moving upslope. They might shift to different bamboo species or target newer growth at higher altitudes. In autumn, pandas often feed on bamboo leaves, which are more nutrient-rich in fall than in other seasons. Winter is the hardest time, when pandas subsist primarily on old bamboo leaves and woody stems, the least nutritious parts of the plant. This seasonal movement requires pandas to maintain relatively large home ranges. A female panda's home range typically covers between 2 and 3 square miles, while males range over larger territories, sometimes 4 to 6 square miles or more. Males need larger ranges partly because they're bigger and need more food, but also because their territories often overlap with multiple female territories. Pandas mark their territories through scent marking, scratching trees, and other behaviors, but their territorial boundaries are somewhat fluid. Individuals may tolerate some overlap, especially between males and females, though pandas generally avoid each other. Pandas are primarily solitary animals. Outside of brief mating encounters and the extended period when mothers care for cubs, pandas spend almost all their time alone. This solitary nature likely relates to their diet. Bamboo provides such low nutrition that pandas can barely meet their own energy needs. Supporting group living would require even more abundant resources. By living alone, pandas avoid competition for food within their home ranges and don't waste energy on social interactions that don't directly contribute to survival or reproduction. A typical day for a panda is remarkably simple and repetitive. They wake, often in the morning or late afternoon depending on the season, and begin eating. They eat for several hours, take a rest, then eat some more. They'll feed, rest, feed again, rest again throughout their waking hours. Pandas are not strictly diurnal or nocturnal. They're active whenever they need to be, which generally means whenever they need to eat. In captivity, where food is more plentiful and requires less time to obtain, pandas sleep more, sometimes 12 to 14 hours a day. In the wild, with the constant need to consume large quantities of bamboo, they rest less and eat more. When pandas aren't eating or sleeping, they're usually just sitting or lying around, digesting their enormous bamboo meals and conserving energy. They don't engage in extended play or complex social behaviors. They don't patrol their territories extensively. They don't hunt or problem solve or do much of anything beyond the basics. This might make pandas seem dull, but it's actually a sophisticated adaptation. Every calorie saved is a calorie that doesn't need to be replaced through more bamboo consumption. By minimizing energy expenditure, pandas make their marginal diet barely sufficient. Pandas avoid steeply sloping terrain when they can, preferring gentler slopes and valley bottoms where travel is easier and requires less energy. They'll rest in caves, hollow trees, or dense bamboo thickets that provide shelter from weather and potential predators. Adult pandas have few natural predators. Snow leopards occasionally attack pandas, particularly young or vulnerable individuals, and yellow-throated martens, wild dogs, and Asian black bears may pose threats to cubs. But healthy adult pandas are large enough and strong enough that few animals will risk attacking them. The mountainous terrain and fragmented habitat create another challenge: isolation. Some panda subpopulations are so small and so isolated that they face serious genetic bottlenecks. When populations drop below a certain size, inbreeding becomes likely, reducing genetic diversity and making the population more vulnerable to disease, environmental changes, and random catastrophes. Conservationists worry that some of these small populations may not be viable in the long term without intervention to increase gene flow between groups. Human activities have dramatically shaped and reduced panda habitat. Roads cut through panda territory, fragmenting habitat and creating barriers to movement. Agriculture has converted valley bottoms, forcing pandas into higher, more marginal habitats. Logging, though now restricted or banned in many panda areas, has removed old-growth forests and altered habitat quality. Human settlements, even small ones, create disturbances that pandas tend to avoid, effectively reducing available habitat even in areas where forests remain. Yet, in their remaining strongholds, in the misty forests where bamboo grows thick and human presence is limited, pandas persist. They move through their territories along established trails, marked with scent and worn smooth by generations of passing bears. They feed in favorite groves, rest in known shelters, and follow the rhythms of bamboo growth that have sustained their lineage for millions of years. Life in these mountains is demanding, but pandas have found a ways to endure, to persist in their narrow ecological niche, surviving on the margins, but surviving nonetheless. The complexity of bamboo selection. When we say pandas eat bamboo, it sounds simple, but the reality is far more nuanced. Pandas don't just eat any bamboo that happens to be available, they're surprisingly selective, making complex decisions about what to eat and when. Decisions that reflect a deep, instinctive understanding of seasonal nutrition and bamboo ecology. Scientists have identified more than 40 different species of bamboo that pandas consume across their range. Not every panda has access to all 40 species, of course. Different bamboo species grow at different elevations and in different regions. But within any given panda's home range, there are typically several bamboo species available, and the panda must choose among them based on what will best meet its nutritional needs at that particular time. The bamboo that pandas prefer include species with common names like arrow bamboo, umbrella bamboo, golden bamboo, and water bamboo. Though the scientific names vary by region, each species has different characteristics. Some grow taller, some have thicker stems, some produce shoots earlier or later in the season, some have leaves with higher protein content. Pandas have learned through millions of years of evolution and through individual experience which bamboos to target at which times. Bamboo plants are perennial grasses among the fastest growing plants on Earth. Some bamboo species can grow several feet in a single day during their peak growth period. This rapid growth means that bamboo shoots, when they first emerge from the ground in spring, are soft, tender, and relatively rich in nutrients. Shoots can contain up to 32% protein, an astonishing figure compared to the same bamboo's mature leaves or stems. This makes shoots the most prized part of the bamboo plant, and pandas key their behavior around shoot seasons. In early spring, typically April through August, depending on elevation and species, bamboo shoots begin emerging. During this window, pandas shift their feeding almost exclusively to shoots. They'll dig them out of the ground, strip away the tough outer layers, and consume the tender inner core. A panda might eat dozens of shoots in a single feeding session, taking advantage of this brief period of relative abundance and high nutrition. Studies using radio collars to track wild pandas have shown that during shoot season, pandas will specifically migrate to areas where their preferred bamboo species are producing shoots, sometimes traveling considerable distances. But shoots are ephemeral. Within weeks, the tender shoots harden, becoming bamboo stems. The protein content drops dramatically. The cellulose and lignin content increases, making the plant tougher, more fibrous, and less nutritious. As shoot season ends, pandas must shift their diet. Through summer and into autumn, pandas focus increasingly on bamboo leaves. Leaves have moderate nutritional value, less than shoots, but more than stems. They're also available year-round, making them the most reliable part of the bamboo diet. By late autumn and winter, as leaves age and their nutritional value declines, pandas often have no choice but to eat bamboo stems. Stems are woody, tough, and provide minimal nutrition. They're the lowest quality food pandas eat, barely sustaining life. Winter is a dangerous time for pandas. Their energy intake drops, body condition may deteriorate, and if winter is particularly harsh or long, pandas can starve. Historical records from panda reserves show that the highest mortality rates occur in late winter and early spring, particularly in March and April, right after the hardest part of winter when pandas are weakest and before new shoots emerge. The selective feeding behavior of pandas reflects an attempt to optimize nutrition from a suboptimal food source. Recent research has revealed something fascinating about how pandas make these choices. Scientists studying wild pandas in the Chinling Mountains tracked their movements and diet for 6 years, analyzing the nutritional content of what they ate. They found that pandas aren't just eating randomly available bamboo. They're actively balancing their intake of nitrogen, phosphorus, and calcium, the three most essential nutrients for mammals. Different parts of different bamboo species contain different concentrations of these nutrients. Arrow bamboo shoots might be rich in nitrogen during spring, while wood bamboo leaves might have higher phosphorus content in summer. By moving between elevations, shifting between bamboo species, and selecting different plant parts at different times, pandas are essentially foraging for a balanced diet despite their limited menu. This is a sophisticated form of nutritional geometry, where animals mix dietary items to achieve an optimal balance of nutrients. This selective foraging has another remarkable aspect. Pandas don't actually absorb all the nutrients they consume. Studies have found that pandas selectively excrete certain minerals, particularly calcium, in their feces. This suggests their bodies have adapted mechanisms to avoid mineral imbalances that might result from eating specific bamboo species or parts. Too much calcium can be as problematic as too little, and pandas seem to have evolved physiological mechanisms to maintain proper mineral balance despite huge variations in dietary intake. The complexity of bamboo selection becomes even more important when we consider bamboo flowering events. Bamboos have unusual reproductive strategies. Instead of flowering annually like most plants, many bamboo species flower synchronously over huge areas, then die. These mass flowering events can occur every 30 to 120 years depending on the species, and when they happen, entire mountainsides of bamboo can perish simultaneously. For pandas, this is catastrophic. A mass die-off of their primary food source means potential starvation for any pandas depending on that bamboo species. Having multiple bamboo species in their range provides pandas with crucial insurance against these events. If arrow bamboo flowers and dies, pandas can shift entirely to umbrella bamboo or golden bamboo. If they had access to only one species, they'd face certain starvation. This is why habitat quality isn't just about bamboo abundance. It's about bamboo diversity. A forest with just one bamboo species, no matter how abundant, cannot sustain pandas long term. Climate change adds another layer of concern to bamboo ecology and panda survival. Bamboo species have specific climate requirements, specific temperature and moisture ranges where they thrive. As temperatures rise and precipitation patterns shift, some bamboo species may struggle or disappear from parts of their current range. Models predict that by the end of this century, suitable bamboo habitat could shrink dramatically, potentially by as much as 50 to 100% in some projections. This doesn't just threaten panda food supply. It could fragment habitat even further, isolating populations and making genetic exchange impossible. Yet despite all these challenges, pandas have survived on bamboo for millions of years. They've weathered previous climate shifts, previous bamboo die-offs, previous periods of scarcity. They've done so through selective feeding, through maintaining home ranges with diverse bamboo species, through seasonal migration that takes advantage of different bamboo growth cycles, and through sheer persistence. The relationship between pandas and bamboo is ancient, complex, and finely tuned through countless generations. Understanding this relationship in all its nutritional subtlety and ecological complexity, is essential to ensuring pandas can continue to survive in an increasingly uncertain future. Reproduction and early life. If the panda's bamboo diet seems like an evolutionary liability, their reproductive biology appears designed to make species survival even more improbable. Giant pandas have one of the most challenging reproductive profiles of any mammal, characterized by narrow fertility windows, low birth rates, and the production of extraordinarily helpless offspring. Understanding panda reproduction helps explain why this species, despite millions of years of evolutionary success, teeters constantly on the edge of viability. Female giant pandas are only fertile once a year, and that fertility window lasts just 24 to 72 hours. That's it. 2 or 3 days each spring, typically in March or April, when a female panda ovulates and can conceive. If breeding doesn't occur during this narrow window, there's no second chance until next year. For a solitary species where males and females spend most of their time avoiding each other, finding a mate during such a brief period presents obvious challenges. The process begins with scent marking and vocalizations. As a female approaches estrus, her body chemistry changes, and she begins leaving scent marks that advertise her condition. Male pandas detect these signals and may travel considerable distances seeking the female. Multiple males might converge on the same female, sometimes leading to confrontations and competition. Females appear to prefer larger, more dominant males, possibly because these males carry genes that indicate genetic fitness. When mating occurs, it's brief but energetic. The actual copulation may last only 30 seconds to 5 minutes, though a pair might mate multiple times over a couple of days if they remain together. Then, as quickly as they came together, the pandas separate. The male returns to his solitary existence, providing no paternal care whatsoever. The female, if conception occurred, begins one of the most unusual pregnancies in the mammal world. Panda pregnancies involve delayed implantation, a phenomenon where the fertilized egg doesn't immediately attach to the uterine wall. Instead, it floats free for weeks or even months before finally implanting and beginning real development. Because of this delay, the actual pregnancy length varies enormously, anywhere from 95 to 160 days from conception to birth. But the period of active fetal development is much shorter, usually just 45 to 60 days. This means that for much of what we call pregnancy, not much is actually happening. This creates a confounding problem: pseudopregnancy. Female pandas, even when not pregnant, show many signs of pregnancy. Their hormone levels change, their behavior shifts. They may build nests and show maternal behaviors. Distinguishing a real pregnancy from a pseudopregnancy is incredibly difficult, even for experienced keepers and veterinarians using modern medical technology. This has long complicated breeding efforts in captivity, where knowing whether a panda is truly pregnant is crucial for providing appropriate care. When a real pregnancy reaches its conclusion, birth happens rapidly. The female builds a den, often in a hollow tree or cave, lining it with bamboo leaves and other vegetation. She becomes increasingly restless as labor approaches, pacing and bleeding. Then, usually after just a few hours of labor, she gives birth to one of the most helpless creatures in the mammal world. Newborn pandas are astonishingly tiny. At birth, a panda cub weighs just 3 to 5 ounces, roughly 1/900th the size of its mother. That's smaller than a stick of butter, roughly the length of a pencil. The cub is born blind, deaf, completely hairless, or with only the faintest fuzz of white hair, and utterly helpless. It cannot regulate its own body temperature, cannot eliminate waste without stimulation, and can do little beyond squeak and wriggle. For comparison, most bear cubs are born weighing about a pound and have some fur for insulation. Pandas take the bear pattern of helpless young to an extreme. Often, females give birth to twins. But here's where panda reproduction becomes truly heartbreaking. In the wild, a mother panda cannot successfully raise 2 cubs. Her body simply doesn't produce enough milk to sustain both, and carrying 2 cubs while foraging for bamboo is probably impossible. So the mother makes a choice. She'll select one cub, usually the stronger or more vigorous one, and devote all her energy to that infant. The other cub, though perfectly viable, is abandoned. Left alone, unable to maintain body temperature or feed itself, the rejected cub dies within hours or days. This seems cruel, but it's a survival strategy. By focusing all resources on one cub, the mother maximizes that cub's chances of survival. Trying to raise both would likely result in both cubs dying and the mother becoming too weakened to survive herself. In captivity, where humans can intervene, both twins can often be raised, either by swapping cubs between mother and incubator, or by hand-raising one while the mother cares for the other. But in the wild, twins mean one cub lives and one dies. The chosen cub faces a long period of intensive maternal care. For the first weeks of life, the mother cradles her cub almost constantly against her chest, warming it with her body heat and nursing it every couple of hours. She rarely eats during this early period, sometimes fasting for days, living off her fat reserves while she focuses entirely on her infant. The cub, meanwhile, grows slowly. Its eyes open at 6 to 8 weeks. It begins to develop the characteristic black and white markings, with the eye patches becoming visible around the same time. At about 3 months, the cub starts to crawl. By 4 months, it can walk, though clumsily. Nursing continues for about 9 months, but cubs begin eating bamboo themselves at around 6 months of age, nibbling on leaves their mother drops and gradually learning which bamboos to eat and how to process them. This long learning period is crucial. Pandas aren't born knowing which bamboos are nutritious or how to strip stalks efficiently. They learn by watching their mothers, by trial and error, by gradual accumulation of knowledge that will sustain them once they're independent. Cubs remain with their mothers for 18 months to 2 years, an extended childhood that allows thorough learning but also means females can only reproduce every 2 years at most, and in practice, often less frequently. If a mother struggles to find sufficient food or if she's in poor condition, she might not come into estrus the year after weaning a cub, extending the gap between births even longer. When separation finally comes, it's often triggered by the mother entering estrus again. Her body chemistry shifts, her tolerance for her cub decreases, and she drives the young panda away. The young panda, now about 18 months old and roughly 50 to 75 pounds, must establish its own home range, find its own feeding areas, and survive independently. Mortality at this stage is relatively high. Young pandas must avoid established adults, find sufficient bamboo, escape predators, and navigate all the challenges of their habitat without guidance. Sexual maturity doesn't come until a panda is 5 to 7 years old, further slowing reproductive rates. Even then, not every mature female breeds every year. When you add it all up, a female panda might produce only 5 to 8 cubs in her entire lifetime. And if half don't survive to adulthood, the species' reproductive rate becomes precariously low. This reproductive strategy seems almost designed for extinction. Low fertility rates, tiny windows for conception, helpless young, inability to raise twins, long periods between births, high juvenile mortality. It's a perfect storm of reproductive challenges. And yet, when conditions were right, when habitat was extensive and human impacts minimal, pandas survived and even thrived with this strategy. It's only in recent centuries, as human pressures have mounted and habitat has shrunk, that panda reproduction has become insufficient to maintain stable populations. The reproductive biology that worked for millions of years now leaves the species vulnerable, unable to rebound quickly from population declines, and dependent on intensive conservation to persist. The Gut Microbiome Mystery. Inside every animal's digestive tract lives an invisible ecosystem, a vast community of bacteria, fungi, archaea, and other microorganisms that help break down food, synthesize vitamins, and interact with the host's immune system in complex ways. This gut microbiome can be as important to an animal's survival as its own cells, particularly for herbivores that depend on microbial partners to digest plant material. Given the giant panda's unusual diet and carnivore anatomy, scientists expected to find a highly specialized gut microbiome perfectly adapted for processing bamboo. What they discovered instead was another layer of the panda paradox. When researchers first analyzed the gut microbiomes of wild and captive pandas, they found something shocking. Panda gut bacteria look more like those of carnivores than herbivores. The microbial community in a panda's intestines resembles in many ways the bacterial populations found in dogs, cats, and other meat-eating carnivores. This discovery was completely unexpected. After millions of years eating bamboo, shouldn't pandas have evolved gut bacteria specialized for breaking down cellulose and extracting nutrition from fibrous plants? The explanation reveals just how recently, in evolutionary terms, pandas committed to their bamboo diet. 2 million years might sound like a long time, but it's actually quite short for the evolution of entirely new gut microbiomes. True herbivores like cows have had tens of millions of years to co-evolve with bacteria capable of efficiently breaking down cellulose. Their gut bacteria produce vast quantities of cellulase and hemicellulase enzymes, proteins that can break the tough bonds holding plant cell walls together. These bacteria live in specialized chambers, four-stomached cows being the classic example, where they process plant matter slowly and thoroughly. Pandas, by contrast, have almost negligible amounts of cellulase and hemicellulase genes in their gut microbiomes. Studies have found that pandas have even fewer of these genes than humans, who are omnivores with no particular adaptation for eating fibrous plants. This means pandas are truly terrible at digesting cellulose. The vast majority of the bamboo they eat passes through their system largely undigested. Their brief digestive transit time, just 5 to 13 hours from eating to defecation, doesn't give even their limited complement of gut bacteria much time to work. So, how do pandas extract any nutrition at all? The answer lies in what they can digest. While pandas struggle with cellulose, they can break down and absorb starches and hemicellulose, particularly from bamboo shoots. Shoots, remember, are the most nutritious part of the bamboo, rich in starches and proteins that don't require extensive bacterial digestion. Pandas may also absorb some proteins from bamboo leaves and some simple carbohydrates from all bamboo parts. They're essentially skimming the most easily accessible nutrients and letting the rest pass through unused. One fascinating finding from microbiome studies is that pandas have gut bacteria significantly enriched in genes for degrading cyanide. Bamboo contains cyanide compounds, chemical defenses that many plants use to deter herbivores. For most animals, eating large quantities of cyanide-containing plants would be lethal. Pandas, however, consume an estimated 54 to 66 milligrams of cyanide daily through their bamboo diet, a dose that would sicken or kill many animals. About 80% of this cyanide is metabolized in the panda's body to less toxic thiocyanate and excreted in urine. The remaining 20% is detoxified through other pathways. The gut bacteria help with this detoxification, breaking down cyanide compounds before they can cause harm. This is one area where the panda's gut microbiome has specifically adapted to their diet. Another remarkable finding is how variable the panda gut microbiome is across seasons. Most animals have relatively stable gut bacterial communities. The composition might shift slightly with diet changes, but the core community remains fairly constant. Pandas are different. Their gut microbiomes show dramatic seasonal variation. More variation between seasons than between individual pandas. These shifts appear to correspond with changes in bamboo consumption, particularly the transition between bamboo shoots, leaves, and stems. During spring, when pandas feast on nutritious bamboo shoots, certain bacterial groups increase in abundance, possibly helping process the higher protein and starch content. In summer and fall, as pandas eat more leaves, the microbiome shifts again. In winter, when pandas survive on the least nutritious parts of bamboo, the microbiome changes yet again. The largest variations occur during these seasonal transitions, suggesting the gut microbiome is constantly playing catch-up, trying to adapt to shifting food sources but never quite achieving the stable, optimized state seen in true herbivores. This seasonal instability might actually work against pandas. A stable microbiome can more efficiently extract nutrients because the bacterial community is well established and balanced. Constant shifts mean the microbiome never fully optimizes for any particular food source. It's always in flux, always readjusting, never performing at peak efficiency. This may contribute to the panda's poor nutrient extraction and explain why they need to eat such enormous quantities. The composition of the panda gut microbiome includes some bacterial groups that are enriched or unique compared to other bears. Certain Clostridium species appear in higher numbers in pandas, though interestingly, these bacteria don't seem to be particularly specialized for cellulose digestion. Their role remains somewhat mysterious. Pandas also harbor bacterial species not found in other bears, possibly acquired from their bamboo-dominated environment or evolved from ancestral bacteria that happened to survive the panda's dietary transition. What scientists haven't found is any evidence that the gut microbiome is the key to panda survival on bamboo. Earlier hypotheses suggested pandas must have specialized gut bacteria that allow them to thrive on bamboo despite their carnivore anatomy. The research doesn't support this. Instead, the data suggest pandas are simply inefficient digesters, making do with a suboptimal gut microbiome that hasn't had time to fully adapt to their diet. They survive not because their microbiome is especially good at processing bamboo, but because bamboo is abundant enough that, even with poor digestion, pandas can eat enough to barely meet their needs. This has practical implications for panda conservation. If pandas' digestive efficiency depends heavily on specific gut bacteria, then disrupting those bacterial communities through antibiotics, diet changes, or stress could be catastrophic. But if, as research suggests, the gut microbiome isn't particularly specialized or efficient, then pandas might be more resilient to some types of digestive disruption. Conversely, it means there's likely no simple way to improve pandas' digestive efficiency through probiotic treatments or microbiome manipulation. Their inefficiency appears to be a fundamental consequence of their evolutionary history, not something easily fixed. The Gut Microbiome Mystery underscores just how unusual pandas are. They're carnivores with carnivore guts, eating an herbivore diet without herbivore digestive adaptations. They are surviving on volume and persistence rather than efficiency, making their lifestyle work through sheer determination and the abundance of their food source. It's inefficient, precarious, and improbable. And yet, for millions of years, it's been enough. Communication and social behavior. Despite their solitary lifestyle, pandas are not antisocial. They communicate, they interact, they signal their presence and status to other pandas, even if most of those interactions are indirect. Understanding panda social behavior reveals another layer of adaptation to their unique ecological niche and helps explain how such solitary animals manage to find each other for reproduction and maintain population structure. Scent marking is the primary form of panda communication. Pandas possess scent glands near their tail, at the base of the tail and around the anus. These glands produce secretions that carry chemical information about the individual's sex, age, reproductive status, and possibly identity. Pandas deposit these scents by rubbing their hindquarters against trees, rocks, and other vertical surfaces, leaving marks that other pandas can detect and interpret. But pandas don't just mark at ground level. They often seek out prominent trees and mark them at various heights, with adult males typically marking higher than females or younger males. This is where those remarkable handstands come in. A male panda will approach a tree, turn around, and walk his hind feet up the trunk while leaning forward on his front paws. As he ascends, he presses his scent glands against the bark, leaving his mark as high as possible. By marking high, the panda essentially inflates his apparent size, suggesting to other pandas that a large, possibly dominant individual uses this area. These handstands aren't just functional. They look comical, with a massive bear inverted against a tree, hind feet planted on bark, tail in the air, wobbling slightly as he maintains his balance. But from the panda's perspective, it's serious business, an advertisement of presence and status that might help avoid confrontations or attract potential mates. Pandas also mark by claw-scraping trees, leaving visible scratches along with scent from glands in their paws. They urinate to mark territory, sometimes performing a peculiar behavior called urine backing, where they back up to a tree or rock and spray urine while simultaneously leaving scent gland secretions. All these marking behaviors create a chemical landscape that other pandas can read, learning who's been in an area, how long ago, and what their status might be. Vocalizations add another communication channel. Pandas are generally quiet animals, but they are not silent. They produce a range of sounds including bleats, honks, barks, and roars. Cubs make high-pitched squeals and chirps, sounds that help mothers locate their infants and that may stimulate maternal care behaviors. Adult pandas bleat during mating season, a sound that helps potential mates locate each other. The bleat is somewhere between a sheep's call and a bird's chirp, a surprisingly delicate sound from such a large animal. When aggressive or threatened, pandas can produce loud barks or roars, deep vocalizations that advertise size and strength. These sounds can travel through the dense bamboo forest, warning other pandas to stay away. Pandas might also huff or chuff, blowing air through their nose in a sound that suggests annoyance or discomfort. During actual confrontations, which are rare, pandas can roar impressively, though they typically prefer to avoid direct conflict. Body language plays a role in the limited face-to-face interactions that occur. When two pandas encounter each other unexpectedly, the submissive individual will usually lower its head, look away, and perhaps back off slowly. A dominant panda might approach directly, head up, making itself appear large. If one panda doesn't defer, a confrontation might escalate to swatting, biting, or wrestling. But these fights rarely result in serious injuries. Both animals usually prefer to avoid costly combat. During mating season, when males compete for access to an estrus female, interactions become more intense. Males may confront each other, standing on hind legs to appear larger, swatting with front paws, and biting if necessary. But even these encounters usually end with one male withdrawing before serious harm occurs. The risk of injury simply isn't worth the potential reproductive benefit when food is scarce and healing requires precious calories. Mother-cub interactions represent the most complex social bond in panda life. Mothers are attentive, protective, and physically affectionate with their cubs. They cradle them, groom them, and play gently with them as they grow. Cubs learn through play, developing motor skills and strength through wrestling with their mothers, climbing on her back, and tumbling around the den. This play also reinforces the social bond and may teach cubs about appropriate panda interactions for later life. As cubs mature, play becomes more independent. Young pandas engage in remarkable acrobatics, climbing trees, hanging from branches, and performing somersaults. This playful behavior isn't just fun. It's practice for skills they'll need as adults, developing the strength, coordination, and climbing ability essential for navigating their complex habitat. It's also one of the most endearing aspects of panda behavior, making young pandas irresistibly charming as they tumble, slide, and explore. The limited energy budget imposed by the bamboo diet shapes all panda social behavior. Extended social interactions cost energy that pandas can barely afford to spare. This is likely why pandas evolved such strong solitary tendencies. In more nutritious environments, bear species like brown bears or black bears show considerably more social behavior, with individuals tolerating each other at rich food sources like salmon streams. Pandas rarely have such concentrated food sources, and their constantly marginal nutrition makes every social interaction a potential energy drain. This doesn't mean pandas are incapable of social behavior. In captivity, where food is provided and energy constraints relaxed, pandas sometimes show more tolerance for each other, especially adults and subadults. Some zoos have even maintained small groups of pandas together when space and resources allow. But in the wild, the default is solitude, broken only briefly for mating and extended only for the mother-cub bond. It's a social system shaped entirely by the demands of their diet, another adaptation to life on the margins of nutritional sufficiency. The communication systems pandas have developed, particularly their elaborate scent marking, allow them to maintain population structure and find mates without the energy cost of frequent face-to-face interactions. A male can learn from scent marks where females live, when they might enter estrus, and whether other males are present, all without the need for direct encounters. A female can advertise her location and status without expending energy on travel, or confrontation. It's an efficient system for a species where energy is always limiting, where every calorie counts, and where survival depends on spending most of your time alone, in silence, eating bamboo. From endangered to vulnerable. Conservation story. The story of giant panda conservation is one of the most successful in the history of wildlife protection, a journey from the brink of extinction to gradual recovery achieved through sustained effort, international cooperation, and significant investment of resources and political will. It's also a story that's far from over, with ongoing challenges and an uncertain future despite recent gains. For much of the 20th century, giant pandas were in serious decline. Their range, once spanning much of southern and eastern China, had contracted to a few mountain ranges. Habitat loss drove most of this decline. As China's human population grew and spread, forests were cleared for agriculture and timber. Valley bottoms, the most accessible and fertile areas, were converted first, fragmenting panda habitat into isolated patches separated by farmland, roads, and human settlements. Pandas retreated to higher elevations, steeper terrain, more marginal habitat. Hunting compounded the problem. Though pandas were never extensively hunted for food, they were sometimes killed for their pelts, which were prized for their distinctive coloring. Accidental capture in snares set for other animals killed additional pandas. Even without direct hunting, human presence disrupted panda habitat and behavior, creating disturbance effects that reduced habitat quality and made areas unsuitable even where forests remained. By the 1970s, panda numbers had dropped alarmingly low. A census conducted in 1978 estimated only about 1,000 pandas remained in the wild, though this figure may have been somewhat understated to draw attention to the species' plight. Subsequent surveys suggested slightly higher numbers, but the trend was clearly downward. Habitat fragmentation had split the population into isolated subgroups, many too small to be viable long-term. Genetic diversity was declining as inbreeding increased in these isolated pockets. The Chinese government, to its credit, recognized the crisis early and began taking action. In the early 1960s, even before the full extent of the decline was understood, China established its first 4 panda reserves and issued decrees prohibiting the hunting of pandas and other endangered species. These were important first steps, creating protected areas where habitat destruction would be limited and pandas could persist without human interference. International attention amplified these efforts. The World Wildlife Fund, founded in 1961, adopted the giant panda as its logo, making this Chinese bear the face of global conservation. This choice was partly symbolic, the panda representing endangered species everywhere, but it also reflected genuine concern for the species' survival. The WWF logo, featuring a stylized panda, became one of the world's most recognized conservation symbols, instantly associating the organization with wildlife protection. In 1979, the WWF and the Chinese government signed a groundbreaking cooperation agreement, making WWF the first international conservation organization invited to work in China. This partnership brought resources, expertise, and global attention to panda conservation. WWF helped fund research, supported reserve management, trained Chinese conservationists, and conducted surveys to better understand panda ecology and population status. The 1980s brought mixed news. A management plan developed through WWF China cooperation aimed to protect 60% of all panda habitat within reserves. But satellite imagery and research revealed disturbing trends. Suitable panda habitat in Sichuan province, home to most of the wild population, had shrunk by roughly 50% between 1974 and 1989. Habitat loss wasn't slowing, it was accelerating. Bamboo die-offs added urgency to conservation efforts. In the mid-1970s and early 1980s, massive bamboo flowering events occurred across parts of Panda Range. When bamboo flowers, it produces seeds and then dies over huge areas, sometimes thousands of square kilometers. These natural events, occurring every few decades, had always challenged pandas, but combined with fragmented habitat and small populations, they became potentially catastrophic. During the 1970s bamboo die-off, At least 138 pandas were known to have starved to death, and likely more died unobserved. These events demonstrated how vulnerable pandas had become. The 1990s saw expanded conservation efforts. China increased the number of panda reserves from 13 in 98 to 40 by 2000X, and eventually to more than 60, covering over half of remaining panda habitat. These reserves restricted logging, limited human activities, and provided rangers to patrol for poachers. The Chinese government also implemented broader forest conservation programs, including logging bans in key regions and reforestation initiatives that helped restore degraded habitat. Captive breeding programs became another conservation tool. If wild populations continued declining, captive populations could serve as insurance, preserving genetic diversity and providing animals for potential reintroduction. Chinese facilities, particularly the China Conservation and Research Center for the Giant Panda, developed expertise in panda care and breeding. Initially, captive breeding was frustrating. Pandas proved difficult to breed in captivity, with low conception rates, high cub mortality, and frequent pseudo-pregnancies that confused breeding efforts. But over decades, techniques improved. Scientists learned to identify estrus more accurately through hormone monitoring. Artificial insemination techniques were refined, increasing conception rates when natural breeding failed. Cub care protocols improved, reducing mortality. By the 2000s, captive panda populations were growing steadily. Today, more than 600 pandas live in captivity worldwide, with most in Chinese facilities but others in zoos across the globe, participating in cooperative breeding programs. International cooperation evolved too. In the 1980s, China loaned pandas to American zoos for short-term exhibitions, but these loans were sometimes criticized as prioritizing money over conservation. Legal challenges in the United States led to new policies requiring that panda loans must be long-term, at least 10 years, must include specific research and conservation plans, and must direct the majority of revenues to conservation efforts in China. These loans, typically costing $1 million per year per pair of pandas, have generated substantial funding for reserve management, research, and habitat restoration. The commitment of resources paid off. By the early 2000s, panda populations began stabilizing and even increasing slightly. A national survey in 2004 counted 1,190 wild pandas, up from earlier estimates. A follow-up survey in 2014, conducted with WWF support, found 1,864 pandas in the wild, a 17% increase over a decade. This was the first solid evidence that conservation efforts were working, that pandas could recover if given proper protection and habitat. In 2016, the International Union for Conservation of Nature officially changed the giant panda's status from endangered to vulnerable, recognizing the species' improved prospects. This reclassification sparked both celebration and concern. Celebration because it validated decades of conservation work and showed that endangered species could be brought back from the brink. Concern because vulnerable still means the species faces high risk of extinction. And relaxing conservation efforts could reverse the gains. China responded by emphasizing that it would not reduce conservation efforts despite the reclassification. In 2021, Chinese authorities announced that panda populations had exceeded 800 in the wild and officially changed the species status from endangered to vulnerable in China's own classification system. This milestone represented decades of sustained effort by thousands of people, from government officials to reserve rangers to international conservationists. Yet challenges remain. Habitat fragmentation continues to isolate populations. Climate change threatens bamboo forests and may shrink suitable habitat dramatically in coming decades. Development pressures persist as China's economy grows and infrastructure expands. Some small panda subpopulations remain critically vulnerable, with genetic diversity concerns and low numbers that make them susceptible to random catastrophes. The conservation story also highlights important lessons. Success required sustained effort over decades, not just short-term interventions. It required international cooperation, with Chinese and international organizations working together. It required substantial financial investment, including money from panda loans and tourism. It required scientific research to understand panda ecology and monitor populations. And it required political will, with the Chinese government making pandas a national priority and enforcing protections even when economically costly. Giant pandas remain dependent on human stewardship for their survival. They cannot recover without the continued habitat protection, management, and monitoring. But their story demonstrates that even species on the brink can be pulled back if society commits to their preservation. The panda's journey from endangered to vulnerable is incomplete, but it offers hope, proving that conservation can succeed when properly supported and sustained. Pandas in human care and research. The relationship between humans and giant pandas extends far beyond wild populations and habitat protection. Captive pandas, living in zoos and breeding centers around the world, have become ambassadors for their species and subjects of intensive scientific study. These animals in human care have taught us much of what we know about panda biology, from reproduction to nutrition to behavior, while also raising important questions about the ethics and effectiveness of captive breeding for conservation. The history of pandas in captivity began in the 1930s. In 1936, Ruth Harkness, an American fashion designer, captured a baby panda named Su Lin in China and brought it to the United States. Su Lin became an instant celebrity at the Brookfield Zoo near Chicago, drawing enormous crowds and sparking what became known as the panda cult in American popular culture. Though Su Lin died young in 1938, this cub had demonstrated the power of pandas to capture public attention and sympathy. For decades, keeping pandas in captivity was more about exhibition than conservation. China occasionally gifted pandas to other nations, acts of panda diplomacy that strengthened political and cultural ties. The United States received 2 pandas, Ling Ling and Ha Sing, as a gift following President Nixon's historic 1972 visit to China. These pandas lived at the National Zoo in Washington, D.C., and drew millions of visitors over their lifetimes. They also provided American scientists their first sustained opportunity to study pandas up close. Research on captive pandas transformed our understanding of the species. Scientists could observe behaviors impossible to witness in wild pandas, particularly around reproduction. They discovered the incredibly brief fertility window in females, the phenomenon of pseudopregnancy, the challenges of identifying true pregnancy, and the remarkable helplessness of newborns. Early breeding attempts often failed, but each failure taught researchers something new about panda biology. One crucial discovery involved hormone cycles. By analyzing hormones in urine and feces, scientists learned to identify when females entered estrus and when pregnancy actually occurred. This allowed more precise timing of breeding attempts and better pregnancy management. Ultrasound technology later enabled visualization of developing fetuses, helping distinguish real pregnancies from pseudopregnancies, though even with modern tools, this remains challenging. Artificial insemination became a vital tool. Many captive males proved reluctant or unable to breed naturally, possibly due to the unnatural captive environment or lack of experience. By collecting semen from males and artificially inseminating females during their brief fertile window, researchers dramatically increased conception rates. Today, many captive panda births result from artificial insemination. And Chinese facilities have developed remarkable expertise in these techniques. Captive breeding also revealed the twin challenge. In captivity, both twins can often be saved through careful management. When a female gives birth to twins, keepers can swap the cubs every few days, ensuring each gets maternal care while the other stays in an incubator. Or keepers can hand-raise one cub while the mother cares for the other. These techniques have allowed captive populations to grow more quickly than would be possible if one twin always died. Nutrition research in captivity has provided insights applicable to wild pandas. Scientists have studied how pandas digest bamboo, what nutrients they extract, and how their metabolism functions. They've developed supplementary foods like panda cakes to ensure captive pandas receive adequate nutrition without requiring impossibly large quantities of bamboo. They've learned which bamboo species grow best in different climates, helping zoos outside China's bamboo range maintain suitable diets. Behavioral research has cataloged panda activity patterns, play behaviors, maternal care, and individual personalities. Yes, pandas have personalities. Some are more active, others lazy. Some are bold, others shy. Some are gentle, others occasionally aggressive. Understanding these individual differences helps keepers provide appropriate care and can guide breeding decisions, matching individuals whose temperaments might complement each other. Veterinary medicine for pandas has advanced dramatically. Early captive pandas often died from diseases or conditions that couldn't be diagnosed or treated. Today, pandas receive sophisticated medical care, including dental work, surgery, and treatments for everything from parasites to cancer. Veterinarians have learned panda-specific anatomy, physiology, and medicine, knowledge that can help treat sick or injured wild pandas when found. The current captive panda population exceeds 600 individuals worldwide, with the vast majority in China. Facilities like the Chengdu Research Base of Giant Panda Breeding and the China Conservation and Research Center for the Giant Panda at Wolong and Bifencasia have become centers of expertise, successfully breeding pandas and raising cubs. Outside China, major zoos in the United States, Canada, Europe, Japan, and other countries house pandas on loan, participating in collaborative research while drawing visitors and raising awareness. These international loans generate substantial conservation funding. At approximately $1 million per year per pair, the loans provide significant financial resources directed toward wild panda conservation in China. Critics argue these loans are expensive and question whether the money genuinely benefits conservation or primarily supports facilities and bureaucracy. Supporters counter that the funding has enabled reserve improvements, research, and habitat restoration that would not have occurred otherwise. Panda loans also raise questions about captive breeding's role in conservation. Is keeping pandas in zoos truly helping the species survive, or is it merely preserving genetics while wild populations decline? The ideal conservation strategy protects wild populations in natural habitats. Captive breeding should be a backup, not the primary strategy. For pandas, the emphasis has appropriately remained on habitat protection and wild population recovery, with captive populations serving as insurance and research subjects rather than replacements for wild pandas. There have been attempts at reintroduction, releasing captive-born pandas into the wild. These have met with mixed success. Some released pandas have struggled to adapt, failing to find food, avoid predators, or integrate into wild populations. Others have succeeded, surviving independently and potentially even breeding. The challenges are significant. Captive raised pandas miss crucial learning that wild cubs receive from their mothers about bamboo selection, predator avoidance, territory navigation, and seasonal behaviors. Intensive pre-release training can help, but cannot fully replicate wild experience. Notable individual pandas have become global celebrities. Mei Xiang and Tian Tian at the National Zoo in Washington, D.C. have been stars of the zoo's popular Panda Cam, allowing millions to watch their daily activities online. Their cubs, including Bei Bei, who was born in 2015, drew enormous public attention and affection before returning to China per loan agreements. Similar panda celebrities exist at zoos worldwide, each ambassador for their species, each reminder of what we stand to lose if conservation fails. The research conducted on captive pandas continues advancing our knowledge. Scientists are now studying panda genetics to understand diversity, relatedness, and evolutionary history. They're using captive pandas to test hypotheses about nutrition, reproduction, and behavior that would be impossible to test in the wild. They're developing medical treatments and husbandry techniques that improve care. And they're training the next generation of conservationists, veterinarians, and researchers who will continue working to ensure pandas survive. Captive pandas serve multiple roles simultaneously: research subjects, conservation insurance, educational ambassadors, and sources of public engagement with wildlife. They're not a solution to the panda's precarious status, but they're an important complement to wild population protection. As long as pandas remain vulnerable, captive populations provide security, knowledge, and hope. A backup plan should wild populations face disaster, and a living connection between people worldwide and one of nature's most improbable survivors. The future and ongoing challenges. Despite conservation successes and improved wild panda populations, the future remains uncertain. Giant pandas face ongoing challenges that could reverse recent gains or push them back toward the brink. Understanding these challenges and the efforts to address them provides important context for the panda's prospects in an increasingly changed world. Climate change looms as perhaps the most significant long-term threat. Pandas are adapted to specific climatic conditions in their mountain forest habitats, and they depend entirely on bamboo species that also have specific climate requirements. As global temperatures rise, suitable habitat for both pandas and their food may shift, contract, or disappear. Computer models projecting future climate scenarios suggest that by 2100, suitable panda habitat could shrink dramatically, potentially declining by 50% or more in some scenarios. The mechanisms of climate-driven habitat loss are complex. Rising temperatures may push suitable habitat to higher elevations, but mountains only go so high, eventually running out of space for pandas to retreat upward. Changed precipitation patterns could alter where bamboo grows, potentially reducing bamboo density or diversity in current panda strongholds. Warmer winters might allow parasites or diseases to expand into areas where pandas previously faced fewer health threats. More frequent extreme weather events could cause bamboo failures or directly harm pandas. Bamboo itself faces climate challenges. Different bamboo species respond differently to temperature and moisture changes. Some may expand their ranges while others contract. The mosaic of bamboo diversity that currently provides pandas with year-round food across elevations and seasons could become simpler, less diverse, less reliable. If key bamboo species decline or disappear from regions where pandas live, the consequences could be catastrophic. Even subtle changes in bamboo growth patterns, flowering times, or nutritional content could impact pandas already living on the edge of nutritional adequacy. Habitat fragmentation remains a critical problem. Current panda populations exist in isolated mountain ranges separated by human-dominated landscapes. Roads, agriculture, cities, and development create barriers that pandas cannot or will not cross. This isolation prevents genetic exchange between populations, leading to inbreeding and loss of genetic diversity in small groups. It also means that local extinctions cannot be naturally recolonized from nearby populations. Efforts to address fragmentation include creating wildlife corridors, protected pathways that connect isolated habitat patches and allow pandas to move between them. These corridors need sufficient bamboo, appropriate cover, and minimal human disturbance. Some corridors have been established, but maintaining them requires ongoing commitment and resources. Roads present particular challenges. When roads cut through panda habitat, They fragment populations and create mortality risks from vehicle strikes. Solutions like wildlife underpasses or overpasses can help, but they're expensive and require careful planning. Small population sizes in some areas create genetic concerns. Populations of fewer than 50 individuals face serious risks of inbreeding depression, where harmful recessive genes become more common and overall fitness declines. Several panda subpopulations fall below this threshold. Genetic management, potentially including translocation of individuals between populations, or even genetic rescue through assisted reproduction, may become necessary. These interventions carry risks and require careful consideration, but doing nothing may condemn small populations to gradual decline through inbreeding. Human-panda conflict, though less dramatic than habitat loss or climate change, poses ongoing challenges. As panda habitat abuts agricultural land and human settlements, interactions occur. Pandas occasionally raid crops, particularly corn or other high-nutrition foods near forest edges. This can create hostility among local residents who may already resent land use restrictions associated with panda reserves. Conservation programs that compensate farmers for crop losses or provide alternative livelihoods can reduce conflict, but require sustained funding and community engagement. Disease threats are poorly understood but potentially serious. Pandas have few known diseases in the wild, but this may partly reflect limited observation rather than actual resistance. Domestic dogs, livestock, and other animals living near panda habitat carry pathogens that could potentially infect pandas. A novel disease spreading through a small, isolated panda population could devastate it before conservationists even detected the problem. Better disease surveillance and health monitoring of wild pandas could help catch emerging threats early. Economic and political challenges affect conservation success. Protecting panda habitat costs money, requires enforcement, and sometimes means foregoing economic development opportunities. China's commitment to panda conservation has been remarkable, but maintaining this commitment through changes in government, economic conditions, and national priorities will be essential. International support through zoo loans, tourism, and conservation partnerships helps sustain political will by demonstrating global interest in panda survival. Tourism presents a double-edged sword. Panda reserves attract visitors, generating revenue that can fund conservation while raising awareness. But too much tourism can disturb pandas, degrade habitat, and create infrastructure that fragments habitat further. Balancing tourism's benefits against its impacts requires careful management. Some reserves have developed sophisticated systems limiting visitor numbers, restricting access to sensitive areas, and channeling tourism revenue directly into conservation activities. Research needs continue. Despite decades of study, major gaps remain in our understanding of panda biology and ecology. We need better population monitoring techniques to track numbers and trends accurately. We need more knowledge about panda genetics to guide management. We need deeper understanding of bamboo ecology and how bamboo forests will respond to climate change. We need information about panda movements, habitat use, and behavior in wild conditions. Filling these knowledge gaps requires sustained research funding and international cooperation. Education and public engagement remain crucial. Pandas have captured public imagination worldwide, but this attention must translate into support for conservation. Teaching people about pandas, their challenges, and what's being done to help them builds the foundation for sustained conservation support. Schools, zoos, media, and online platforms all play roles in maintaining public interest and understanding. The establishment of the Giant Panda National Park in 2020 represents a major conservation advance. This enormous protected area, covering over 10,000 square miles across Sichuan, Shanxi, and Gansu provinces, encompasses habitat for more than 80% of wild pandas. By connecting previously fragmented reserves and providing coordinated management across a huge landscape, the national park addresses several key threats simultaneously. It reduces fragmentation, protects diverse habitat, and signals China's continued commitment to panda conservation. Yet, the national park alone cannot guarantee pandas' future. Climate change will not respect park boundaries. Human pressures exist beyond protected areas. Pandas will need adaptive management, probably including assisted migration if habitat shifts with climate, genetic management to maintain diversity, ongoing research to understand emerging challenges, and sustained political and public support through decades to come. The panda's story is far from over. They have survived millions of years, weathered mice ages, adapted to extraordinary dietary constraints, and recently begun recovering from steep declines. They've proven more resilient than many scientists expected. But their future depends on choices humans make. How we address climate change, how we manage landscapes, how we prioritize conservation against competing interests, and whether we maintain commitment to sharing Earth with other species. Pandas cannot save themselves. They need us. But they've also given us something in return. A symbol of what's possible when conservation efforts are sustained and supported. Proof that species on the brink can recover, and a reminder that protecting wildlife ultimately means protecting the ecosystems and processes that sustain all life, including our own. The panda's future is intertwined with our choices, and in protecting them, we protect something essential about our relationship with the natural world. Closing reflections. And so we come to the end of our journey through the world of giant pandas. We've traveled from ancient European forests to misty Chinese mountains, from the genetic mutations that changed their taste buds to the conservation efforts that pulled them back from the brink. We've watched them eat bamboo with patient determination, seen newborn cubs smaller than butter sticks transformed into massive bears, and witnessed the remarkable, improbable survival of a species that by all logic shouldn't exist at all. What is it about pandas that so captures our hearts and imagination? Perhaps it's that combination of vulnerability and resilience, the way they teeter constantly on the edge yet somehow persist. Perhaps it's their appearance, those round faces and black eye patches that trigger our nurturing instincts. Or perhaps it's that they represent something deeper, a reminder that nature's paths are not always logical or efficient, that survival sometimes requires finding the narrowest of niches and holding on with quiet determination. Pandas teach us about adaptation, about how evolution can lead down unexpected paths that seem suboptimal but somehow work. They show us that specialization can be both strength and weakness, allowing survival in specific circumstances while creating vulnerability to change. They demonstrate that even ancient, successful lineages can find themselves suddenly vulnerable when environments shift or human pressures mount. But pandas also teach us about hope and possibility. Their story of recovery, imperfect and incomplete as it is, shows that conservation can work when sustained with adequate resources and commitment. They prove that public engagement and international cooperation can achieve remarkable things. They remind us that species on the brink can be brought back, that extinction is not inevitable, that choices matter. As you drift towards sleep tonight, perhaps you'll carry with you an image of a panda in its mountain forest, sitting peacefully among bamboo, processing stalk after stalk with those powerful jaws, living its improbable life with quiet persistence. Or perhaps you'll think of a mother panda cradling her impossibly tiny cub, providing warmth and milk and the beginning of education about how to survive on bamboo. Or perhaps you'll picture wild mountains covered in bamboo forests, mist rolling through valleys, a place where pandas still roam, still eat, still survive against the odds. The giant panda is black and white, but its story contains shades of gray. It's a tale of evolutionary gambles, of near extinction and tentative recovery, of ongoing vulnerability and reasons for hope. It's a reminder that we share this planet with remarkable creatures whose survival often depends on our choices, our priorities, and our willingness to make space for them in a human-dominated world. So, as you rest tonight, as your breathing slows and your thoughts grow gentle, know that somewhere in the mountains of central China, pandas continue their ancient rhythm. They're eating bamboo in the mist, marking trees with their scent, resting in their dens. They're being pandas, doing what they've done for millions of years, survivors of their own evolutionary choices, and now, in this modern age, survivors because humans chose to help them survive. The story isn't finished. The challenges remain real. But tonight, the pandas endure. And if we continue the work, continue the commitment, maintain the protection they need, perhaps they'll continue enduring long into the future. Black and white bears in green forests, eating bamboo with determination, reminding us that even the most improbable lives can persist when given a chance. If you've enjoyed this gentle journey into the world of pandas, if these calm explorations have helped you unwind and given you a peaceful way to end your day, consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It helps others discover their way here too, finding their own moments of quiet wonder before sleep. Thank you for spending this evening with me, learning about these remarkable bears. Sleep well, dream gently, and perhaps dream of misty mountains, bamboo forests, and the soft sound of a panda contentedly munching its way through another 40 pounds of bamboo. Good night.